Everybody knows when you say, hey, are you on the path? People would say, they would know. They know what that means. Everyone understands what it means to be on the path. People wander and they don't recognize that there is a path, that there is a path that they can create in their own head, and that path is going to take them to where they want to be. And you can have a million good ideas that have zero value in the world. Zero. They could be the best ideas ever. They have zero value in the world if you don't have the discipline to execute on them. So all these things you created, you come up with this path, and then you get on the path and you stay on it. So for me, that's what the path is. You know what the path is. You know when you're off the path, you know when you're on the path, and you know that the path leads you to where you want to be.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs, sharing our vulnerability, overcoming our fears, transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jocko Willink, the former U.S. Navy SEAL commander turned author, broadcaster, and business consultant. In your 20-year career in the Navy SEALs, you rose through the ranks to become commander of Task Unit Bruiser, the most highly decorated special operations unit of the Iraq War. In 2010, you retired and founded Echelon Front with a mission to educate, train, mentor, and inspire leaders and organizations to achieve total victory. You host the top-ranked Jocko Podcast and have authored the bestsellers Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership, as well as 4 children's books. Your latest work, Leadership, Strategy, and Tactics Field Manual, delivers your powerful and pragmatic leadership methodology that can be applied to any situation. Jocko, welcome back to London Real.
Good to see you remotely.
It's weird remote, but we're going to get through this. You know, I think it was almost 4 years to date that you first came on the show. I still remember it vividly. I think you had just started podcasting maybe a few months earlier. And I had heard you on Ferris, I heard you on Rogan, and it was great having you in the studio. And, you know, for you to talk about extreme ownership back then was super powerful for me because I was still learning to be a leader. To be honest, I'm still learning. But at the time, I hadn't really thought about it. And, you know, most of my career on Wall Street, I actually shied away from leadership positions. I remember just not wanting them and not wanting to deal with people. But, you know, with London Real, I had to be. And so I applied a lot of your extreme ownership pieces over the years. I'm still doing that. And then 2 years later, you came back to London and I felt like I had to turn up the juice a little bit. The studio wasn't enough. So of course we rented out the warship and walked around the HMS Belfast on the Thames and ended up making all that into a documentary film called Lessons from War. People can watch both of those things on our website as well. And at the end, I offered you a chocolate chip cookie and you turned me down, Jocko. So I'm still recovering from that. You know, you said that leadership is the most challenging of human endeavors and it's often misunderstood. And I was wondering what do you see in the form of leadership from this whole coronavirus and lockdown? And I'm wondering what you're seeing from individuals in San Diego, from all the business leaders that you teach, from all the people that follow you on social media. I mean, as an observer, what are the things that you see that maybe excite you or impress you, or other things you see where there's like a gap in leadership?
One of the things that I've been rolling through with a lot of my clients, a lot of people asking about. So when you're in a situation like this, I always tell people as leaders, what you need to do is you need to tell the truth to your team. You need to tell them the truth about what's happening. And, you know, there's going to be bad news. And if you sit on that bad news, it's not going to get any better. In fact, it's going to get worse. So you want to tell people the truth about what's going on. But what's interesting about this scenario is people don't know what's going on. So how do you handle that, Jocko? If I don't know what the truth is, how do I handle that? What do I tell my team when I don't know what the truth is? What you do then is you tell your team the truth about not knowing. So when you say, listen, right now this is impacting our business, I don't know how long it's going to last for. You can't say, hey, this is only going to last 6 weeks, or this is only going to last a month, or this is going to last until, Christmas. You don't know. And I promise you, the minute you put your stake in the ground and you make a claim about something, Murphy's Law says it's going to go completely the other direction. So what you do is you say, hey, team, I don't really know how long this is going to last. It looks like it could be anywhere between 4 weeks and 4 months. And so this is what we're going to prepare for. We're going to be ready in the short term to do this. In the long term, if it extends, we're going to be ready over here. We're going to develop some contingency plans, and this is how we're going to move forward. And so by telling your team the truth about what's happening, and by telling the team the truth about what you don't know, your team actually increases their trust for you. And it's a good way to stay unified as a team, because you all have the same understanding of where you're going and how you're going to get there.
Did you have similar experiences in Ramadi where you only had limited information, where you kind of had to tell your guys, look, this is what I know and this is what I don't know?
Oh, absolutely. Every operation that you go on is limited information. The idea that you see in the movies of someone giving you the blueprint of the building and where the bad guys are and where their team is, the enemy is going to be set up, that doesn't exist. You're going in there with very limited knowledge. I mean, you get varying levels of knowledge, but there's no way that you as a leader can say, hey, you know what? I know everything. I know what's going to happen. And here's the way it's going to unfold. It doesn't work that way. So you have to just admit what you know and explain what you don't know and explain your planning around handling those contingencies.
Yeah, it was interesting when this first started going down. I have a company that the average age is much younger than me. It's probably 20 years younger than me, which means I'm old and they're young. And my first reaction, Jocko, was to say, look, I've been through some crises. Like I was in New York City in 9/11. I've seen the 2008 crash, and I've gotten through those things, and I've realized that sure, things looked really bad and looked crazy, but we always found a way through. And for some of these, kids in their 20s, maybe this is the biggest and craziest thing they've ever been through. And I was trying to kind of assure them with that statement, but I don't know if I always did the best job by saying just that. And I'm just wondering, what are some of the things that you advise leaders to do? Because I know you speak to companies across the spectrum. Is it saying something like that? Is it being honest? Is it trying to instill some confidence in people?
Yeah. The other thing is, that's good. And it's the same thing with any project that you're working on. Like there's going to be a long-term goal, and you can say, hey, look, and you want to show people a light at the end of the tunnel. Listen, this virus is going to eventually run its course regardless. And it's going to taper off. That's what will happen. That's what nature will cause, but we don't know when that's going to be. So you give them that long-term kind of light at the end of the tunnel. And it's sort of like explaining to someone why a mission is important. Hey, this is important because it fits into the strategy over here or over there. So you want to give them that long-term, but then you also want to say, listen, in the meantime, while we're waiting for this thing to run out, here's some short-term things that we're going to do. We're going to be okay. We're going to tighten up the team. We're going to pivot in this direction to make sure we can still support our clients over here. So you make little short-term goals that are attainable so that people understand, listen, we don't need to get paralyzed. We need to take action. We need to move. We need to move forward, and we can do it with little chunks, little movements at a time, which is how people continue to function by taking action.
Okay. One of the other mantras I kept repeating in my head and talking about was that I want to expand and not contract in this environment. I want to come in every day and think I'm going to grab market share. I'm going to take advantage of opportunities when I'm expecting everyone else is going to contract, lick their wounds, reduce things. And I think the only way I could do that is because I've been through a couple of these before where, looking back at my behavior, I did contract and I got really scared and I cut back on everything, which meant maybe short-term it was good, but long-term for the business it was bad. I guess there's a dichotomy of expansion as well, but is this something that you're trying to think about and you're encouraging clients to do? Or is there a dichotomy of that as well, where you don't expand too much that you go bust?
Yeah, you called it. Someone could say right now, hey, I'm going to dump money into advertising. And you got to realize people are laid off right now. They might not have a lot of money to buy your product, whatever that product is. So if you dump a lot of money into advertising when no one has any cash to spend, well, that's not going to be a good move. But to go totally dormant on the other end of the spectrum, obviously that's going to be bad too, because you got to keep in people's head. You got to keep letting people know that, you've got your product, and when things recover, you're going to be standing by, and what can we do to help you? Is there anything that you need? So yeah, it's a dichotomy. You got to find the balance in the middle. You don't want to go too far in one direction or the other. As a banker, you avoided leadership. You didn't step into leadership positions. And I was probably late 90s. There was a civil war going on in Sri Lanka. And I went and with, some other SEALs and some Army Special Forces guys, and we went over there and we were helping train the government forces to fight this insurgency. And I was talking to this Sri Lankan Special Forces captain. Actually, he was a major. And as I was having this conversation with him, he was explaining to me that he had been in a ton of combat, and I hadn't been in any. It was pre-September 11th. There was no wars going on. And so even though I had been in the SEAL teams for almost 10 years at that time, I still hadn't been in any combat. So I was talking to him and trying to figure out trying to learn lessons from him that he had learned in combat. And one of the things that I'll never forget him saying to me was, he said, listen, for me to take care of myself in combat is easy. It's easy. I know I can go into a tough combat situation. I know what I need to do. I know the little maneuvers I need to make as an individual to survive. And he said, but when you're in a leadership position and you've got all these other people counting on you, the demand on you mentally and physically and emotionally is infinitely higher. And that was one of the first times I realized the burden that you as a leader carry. And so when you were younger, Brian, you were probably had an attitude where you maybe felt some of that burden, or you sensed that burden and you said, you know what? I don't want any of that. And you shied away from it. And then as you got older and you realized if you want to have impact on people, you're going to have to step up and lead. So interesting transition to go through. And I think a lot of people go through that transition in life.
So as far as people not wanting to step up and be a leader, that's kind of a natural thing to resist that position.
I don't know if it's natural for everyone. I think it's probably natural for a majority of people when they're younger and they're looking around and you're just trying to survive yourself. I know I've always had a tendency to actually, when there was a leadership vacuum, to step in and try and make things happen. I talk about that in Leadership Strategy and Tactics. The main reason for that was I was never really that naturally talented at anything. So I had to kind of capitalize on other people's talents in order to make things happen. And then that's what I ended up doing, even as a young kid. When we were gonna raid the opposing team's camp with squirt guns, I would, organize how we were going to do it, because I knew that Johnny could run faster than me and Billy would be able to jump the wall or the fence faster than me. So I'd come up with a good plan and we'd go execute. And I think from a young age, I realized that the best thing that I could do was kind of come up with a plan and point people in the right direction. So I think some people have a tendency to step into those leadership positions a little bit more, but I think it's a very natural human instinct to realize the burden of leadership and to shy away from it as well. I think both those characteristics fall in different people in different times in their lives.
Yeah, it's been interesting because as a leader, I now know that everyone's watching me all the time. And it means that, I'm from San Diego like you. I spent 14 years of my life wearing shorts every single day. Okay, this is not normal for me. All right, but I get up every day and I put this on because for me, it's showing my team and showing the world that I'm ready, I'm prepared. And the funny thing with that, Jocko, is that by doing that, I actually have my own self-discipline. And I feel better about myself that I've become this person that now is being watched by others. And for me, it's been a self-fulfilling prophecy and almost like a feedback loop where I become a better leader, become a better individual, and vice versa.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I talk about from my perspective, the root of leadership. And when I really started to learn to take a step back and detach, which really was one of the first lessons I learned about being a leader. One of the things that made me realize that was, when I was a young enlisted SEAL in a SEAL platoon, I was constantly watching the leadership. I was observing them If they were late, I noticed it. If they didn't have their gear, I noticed it. And I logged it down in my head. Each mistake that they made, and I'd think to myself, oh, look at this guy. He thinks he can be in charge of us. He can't even show up on time. So by the time I was in a leadership position, it was pretty easy for me to remember what it was like for me to look at that guy and realize that all these guys were looking at me. And I'm not saying they're looking at me in awe or anything like that. I'm actually saying the opposite. They're looking at me, looking for me to make a mistake, looking for me to set the bad example so that they don't feel compelled to listen to what I have to say. So that absolutely elevates the way you behave actually, I should say this. It should elevate the way you behave when you're in a leadership position. You should be looking at people and at yourself and saying, am I setting the right example? And that should be your goal.
Right. Would that leader you look up to have an emotional moment and snap at someone? Would they do all those things, right? They wouldn't. So you have to make sure that everything you do is in a leadership capacity.
No doubt.
Right.
There's nothing more. Well, it's one of the many things, you just talked about snapping at people and losing your temper. I talk about that in leadership strategy and tactics. When you lose your temper as a leader, when you start to panic or you show this overwhelming emotion in one direction or the other, everybody sees that and everybody thinks, hey, if this guy can't control his own emotions, how can I expect him to make good decisions? Because we all know intrinsically that we don't make good decisions when we're super emotional. Everybody knows that. So if I lose my mind and start yelling and screaming, everyone's looking at me thinking, how can this guy make good decisions when he's this emotional? So don't lose your temper. Keep control of your emotions.
One of these conversations I've had with some of my junior members here recently is I sat them down and I said, you need to start leading. And they've come back and said, but I'm not the head of department. And I said, everyone is watching you from the minute you walk in the door. They're watching your emotion, your attitude, what you're wearing, your posture. And you can lead from the bottom as well as you can lead from the top, because every one of your actions, reactions, emotional outbreaks, or lack thereof is going to give people more confidence in who you are and make you more effective in the team. So I'm always saying everyone's leading every minute of the day. Am I right in saying that, or am I taking it to extreme?
No, you're 100% right. You're absolutely in a leadership position, no matter where you are in an organization. Even if you're not in charge of anyone, there's two components. Number one, you're in charge of whatever it is your task is, whatever it is your mission is. You are leading that. You're leading yourself through that. But the other thing you've got to remember is even if you're the bottom person in the chain of command, you have to lead up the chain of command. You have to explain things to your leader about what's happening on the front lines. You have to convey the important messages that that they don't know because they're not there. And what does that take? That takes leadership. So from day one, when you join an organization, you are a leader. And even if you're not an organization, even if you have a solo career, you're still leading your own life. You're in charge of what you do. And as a leader, you have to make the right decisions. Otherwise, you'll end up in a bad situation.
Let's talk about leading your own life, because this is something that I've just, I've been blogging about, when I'm on a train, and I've just been writing it out. And just by saying that in these times, everyone becomes a leader in their personal life too, because maybe you're locked down with a family of 6 and guess what? You're all stuck together. And you can get up and you can sleep in the morning, wake up at 1, loaf around, watch Netflix, complain about the situation, watch too much news, or you could get up early, get dressed, have a plan, stay positive, and you can do that as a 10-year-old kid or an 85-year-old grandmother. And that can make a massive difference in how we get through this situation. Is that right?
Yeah, so I actually got to experiment with this whole concept when I was a young SEAL. Back in the 90s, SEALs would go on deployment on board ships, U.S. Navy ships. We'd go out to sea and travel, across the Pacific or across the Atlantic. And so we'd be on board these ships. Now, when you're a SEAL on a ship, you have no job. You don't have to check the engine room. You don't have to, man the signal devices. You don't have to man the radio. You have no job. You have nothing. In fact, the joke is when in the 90s, when we were SEALs on board ships, we said that SEAL stood for sleep, eat, and lift, because that's all we had to do was just sleep, eat, and lift. And there was guys that would go into the, hey, I'll go to sleep whenever, I'll wake up whenever, doesn't really matter, I'll work out whenever. And you would watch their personal habits and their health and their progress as humans go downhill. Whereas other guys that would say, okay, you know what? I'd have 3 or 4 of my friends. We'd say, let's get up. We're going to work out here. We're going to do our first workout of the day here. We're going to go and study this here. We're going to watch a movie here. Cause it's not like we could fill 24 hours. We'll watch a movie. We'll do our second workout here. We'll practice this here. We'll review this weapon system there. And we actually did things all day long. And the difference between, what that would look like after a month, some guys, you could see them they were getting out of shape. They were dragging ass around the ship because they just were unhealthy, the way they were eating and everything else. Whereas a bunch of us were getting stronger, getting faster, getting smarter about our job. So as soon as this whole quarantine thing started, I knew exactly what mode I was going to go into. And that's exactly what I told everyone. I said, hey, listen, first thing you got to do is make a schedule. Make a schedule. Get up the same time every day. Go to bed the same time every day. This is an opportunity. I've spent the most nights with my wife in the past 6 weeks than I ever have had in my life with her. So that's how much, it's been great, but I'm not going to squander it by sleeping in until 11 o'clock or staying up watching Netflix. No, I'm going to get after it, going to get better, writing all the time. You got to make a schedule. You got to stick to it. Otherwise your lesser being will start to take control. And you don't want that.
And then your self-esteem just starts to drop, right? Because your subconscious mind knows if you are actually earning the day, right? And if you don't earn it, it starts to think less of even yourself, right? And that's when you start dragging ass and all of that stuff. I mean, it ultimately catches up to you.
Yeah, I've said that discipline begets discipline. Like the more discipline you have, the more discipline you have. The opposite's true too. The lazier you are, the lazier you get. So you have to get on the right path. You have to stick to it. And look, if you have a day where you lose it and you don't do what you want to do, take that as a lesson. Because just as you said, at the end of the day, you go, man, I didn't do anything today. I wasted a day. Take that as a lesson. Remember that feeling the next day so you don't repeat that mistake.
And what are you seeing out there? Like from what you observe from the people that follow you on Instagram and on Twitter, I mean, are people setting up routines? Are they struggling with it? Does it start off really well and then after 2 weeks they digress? I mean, what are you seeing or what surprised you in a good way and a bad way with how the public is taking this?
I think a lot of people that I'm communicating with are doing awesome. They're taking advantage of it. I think now people have, at this point, I think, done what they needed to do in terms of like, hey, now it's time to clean out this old file cabinet, and throw away my taxes from 1993. And they've done those kind of things. I think people right now are looking to get back to work if they can. So hopefully we start moving in that direction very soon.
Right. And people can work also from home. I mean, I know you've been doing a lot of consulting and a lot of video stuff. I mean, there's a lot you can do from your home.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so I have a consulting company called Echelon Front, and it's interesting because I was telling actually the people that we consult, I've told many of our clients this, you have to really figure out what your mission is. And you have to strip away until you get to the core of your mission. Because if you looked at Echelon Front 2 months ago and you asked someone that was looking on the outside, what's your mission? It'd be very easy to define the mission of Echelon Front as going to companies, sitting down with their leaders face to face, going and giving keynote speeches about leadership to their teams. You could say that was the mission of Echelon Front. And that means in the current conditions, we can't execute our mission because we're not allowed to travel. We're not allowed to meet with people. So all you have to do is strip away and get to the core of the mission. What is the core of the mission of Echelon Front? It is to teach people the lessons that we learned about leadership so they can lead their teams to victory. Well, guess what? As soon as this started unfolding, I said to the team, hey, listen, our mission hasn't changed. The way we execute our mission is about to change dramatically. And we immediately, and we had ventured into this in the past. So we had an online platform, we would do occasional meetings with clients over, Zoom or other technology. Of course, we always preferred being face-to-face, and so did they, right? So did our clients. Our clients always wanted us to come. And what's happened with this, you and I are doing this right now over Zoom. If you asked me to do this 3 months ago, I probably would have said, hey, Brian, wait till I come back to, England. I'll be back sometime in 2021. Let's do it then or whatever. But now, guess what? I've been on Zoom 3, 4, 6, 8 hours a day. I'm totally comfortable in this environment now. So that's the same thing that's happening with all of our clients. So this is a great, we're actually going to come out of this with a better ability to influence our clients and a better ability to teach our clients, because now we can, instead of me, when a client in New York says, hey, Jocko, we want you to meet with our people. And I say, oh, we want you to present to our people about leadership at our executive offsite. And I say, okay, great. I'm going to fly out there. It takes 5 hours to get across the country. It takes an hour to get from JFK to the hotel. I stay there for the night. I go the next day. I do an hour with the executive team. I present for an hour and I fly back. The whole thing takes 48 hours to do. And what did they get from me? They got 2 hours and they paid a ton of money for it. Well, now and by the way, I also had to sit on a plane, had to leave my family, didn't get to train jujitsu, and there's a bunch of negatives there. So as soon as you reframe this into a position where, yeah, I'll tell you what, I can still present to everyone that you want me to present to. By the way, instead of me being on a stage in front of 100 or 200 of your key executives, I'll be face-to-face with them right here. I'll be face-to-face with every executive you have. I'll be 4 inches away from them. And if they want to ask me questions, they can do it, because instead of me being there for a total of 2 hours, let's do it over 3 days. Let's do 2 hours a day for 3 days where we can really get engaged and get granular, and you can ask specific questions. And all of a sudden, I'm able to provide this company with better information, with more enduring lessons, because they're more deeply entwined in that company itself. So that's the kind of thing that I think, if you keep your mind open about what your mission is, you can actually increase your capabilities, as long as you don't look at it as, hey, our mission is to go and present. Hey, it's our mission to educate people. And there's all kinds of businesses, that have made these types of adjustments. I have another company called Origin, where we make apparel. We make jeans, we make boots, we make jujitsu gis, right? Well, as soon as this thing started happening, I had a couple of friends that hit me up and said, hey, you should start making face masks. And I said, well, why? And they said that there's this disease, this COVID-19. And I said, okay, well, we'll look at it. And I kind of talked to my business partner there and talked about, should we do this? And then a couple of days later, the US government came out and said, hey, don't wear masks. They don't do anything. And I said, okay, cool. They don't do anything. Don't worry about it. We'll keep making jeans. About 5 days later, the US government came out and said, you should wear a face mask. You should wear something over your face. We pivoted. I talked to my business partner on Friday. He started designing over the weekend. On Monday, we went in production. And a lot of people, we donated a bunch of these things to hospitals and doctors and nurses. We sold a bunch of them to people that needed them to do their jobs. But that only came because we were looking around saying, hey, what adjustments do we need to make right now to support what people actually need? That's what they need. Let's give them what they need.
Nice. Very nice. And when it comes to teaching on Zoom as opposed to in person, and I know how much you travel. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a lot, or it used to at least. What is the downside of doing this on Zoom? What's the challenge?
There is an element of being face to face with other human beings that is lost. Now, when you're sending an email, it's down here. When you're on the phone, it goes up. When you're on video, it goes up even more. When we're face to face, then you're seeing my full body language. You're hearing the escalation of my voice even just a little bit clearer. So you're going to lose some of that. You're definitely going to lose. But what I'm realizing is, and this is true with you, Brian, like you and I met face to face. We know each other. So therefore, as soon as we get on, even if you send me a text, that says, hey, Jocko, I'm going to be in San Diego You don't need to say, hey, Jocko, sorry to interrupt you. I hope everything is okay. I hope your family's doing well. I saw your latest book came out. And by the way, I'm in San Diego and I was wondering, you don't need to say all that stuff to me because we know each other. We've met face to face. It's all good. You can text me and say, hey, I'm going to be in San Diego. Can we do an interview? And I go, cool. Sounds good. If we don't know each other and we got to cover this, you wouldn't send me a text that just is so direct like that. So you do lose some of that. But if we have some kind of an established relationship, I think that these connections that we can make over video is very powerful. And I've given this advice to years because we work with all kinds of companies that have global organizations, and they'll say, hey, how do I establish a relationship with my subordinate leader who's 10,000 miles away? And I say, well, look, you're going to need to over communicate. And one of the things you need to do is, if you can, set up video conferencing so they can see you, they can interact with you, and they can get to know you better. Now, I was working for the SEAL Admiral. I was the Admiral's aide. And there was a meeting at the Pentagon. We were in San Diego, California. There was a meeting at the Pentagon, a big meeting with an important decision to be made. And his boss said, you know what? You don't need to fly out for this meeting. I know what your stance is, and I get it, but we'll just do it over video. So we didn't fly out. We did the meeting over video. The decision ended up not going the way my boss wanted it to go. And we got off the line, and my boss was a great guy. He was a very charismatic, and even more than charismatic, he was a very friendly and connecting person. So when people talked to him face to face, he could connect with them very well. We got off that meeting and he hung up and he said, I'll never miss a meeting like that again. And I took it into account. But what I'm seeing now is you can close that delta. I think you can close that delta. And I think if he would have continued to do video meetings, he would have gotten more and more comfortable with it over time, as would his boss. His boss would realize, when we're in the room together right now, Brian, you might have wanted to interrupt me, 45 seconds ago, or maybe even 3 minutes ago at this point. It's going to be a little awkward if you do that. There's a little hesitation. So we have to learn, I have to learn, okay, I've been talking for a while. I need to take a pause to make sure I'm going in the right direction, that Brian doesn't have something to say. So we get better at this. And I think that that's what happens. I think that's what is happening across the world right now. My mom and dad, who are elderly, they had Easter supper with me and my family over Zoom. And it's like people are getting more comfortable with this technology. So I think it's a great thing. I think people will learn how to close the gap a little bit, learn how to operate through this medium in a very positive way. And I think it's going to end up being a good thing for the world.
Yeah, for sure. I had Robert Kiyosaki on a couple weeks ago, and he's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he was like, Brian, a lot of people, never made the transition from the industrial age to the information age. And what he meant by that was industrial age is this concept of kind of trading your time for money with someone in person, which is what, for example, a gardener does or a plumber does, but it's also what a lawyer and a doctor does. Like, you got to be in the office. They got to look at you and touch you. Most of them never got into the information age, even though they're sitting on a mountain of intellectual property, just like you were when you left the SEALs, but you hadn't written Extreme Ownership yet. So you had all this intellectual property in your head, but you hadn't kind of digitized it into a book where it could literally educate millions. And I think the more people can now make this transition into the information age, they can realize that they can actually create financial freedom and wealth by understanding they can now transfer their ideas digitally, as opposed to, say, be somewhere. And especially when we're locked down where that's impossible, I hope people start making this transition.
Yeah. And for me, what's even more important is the fact that, look, my mission in life is to help people. That's what I get my reward from. That's what makes me able to sleep at night and feel good about what I did during the day, is getting feedback from somebody, whether it's in their personal life, their professional life, their family life, their business, whatever. If someone comes back to me and says, hey, you told me to do this, I did it, it worked. Well, there's a limit to how you can contact people. And a book is a great way. Some people don't like to read. Some people, even when they read stuff, they don't process it right. There's nothing better than actually communicating with people. So one of the things that we did as soon as this stuff happened was I said, you know what, we're gonna push down the gas on our online platform, Echelon Front, EF Online. So we have this platform. And before, 6 weeks ago, it was a very static platform that people could go on. There was courses to take. You could learn about certain aspects of leadership. There was some pre-taped video question and answers. So it was a nice platform. It was a functional platform. As soon as this happened, I said, you know what? This is our opportunity to reach a much bigger audience face to face. And when I say face to face, I'm talking about what we're doing right now. And so we immediately implemented this. The expansion's been crazy. We actually had to upgrade our platform. We're making that transition now. But what's awesome about it is that instead of me flying across the country to talk to, even if I'm doing a big event that there's 4,000 people at, I just talked to 4,000 people. I can go to my online platform and talk to hundreds of thousands of people and have them be able to ask questions. And we're setting up this whole platform so that people can have really direct interactions with us. So yeah, I think the opportunities are there to do a much better job of what we were doing before at Echelon Front, what I was doing before, and to do a much better job in many different industries now that we have people across the world getting used to this platform.
Yeah, it's strange that we've been actually teaching this way it's coming up on 5 years now, just over 5 years, using Zoom. Funny enough, started using Zoom back in January 2015. So we've been teaching to sometimes like 14 different time zones. I had a call Tuesday with our Business Accelerator course. You know, the Kiwis and the Aussies are up at 3 a.m. because we do it at 6 p.m. London time. And they're all across all these different time zones. We've had like 107 countries graduate. And we hold this like virtual community for 8 weeks. I'm doing the live calls, so it's real, and I'm interacting with people, and then they go into a community and upload videos and stuff, and it's just a great way to learn. It's also a great way to learn how to teach on that platform and broadcast your IP. So I'm seeing some people be really proactive by this. I'm seeing some other people that are resisting, so it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out. Question about fear, Jocko. You know, a lot of people have gone through different stages of fear the last 4 weeks. And I know some people that are still terrified. I know people that have been guests on London Real that haven't left their house in 55 days, and I'm wondering, you dealt with fear and you dealt with a team dealing with some very serious fears, like going out and maybe not coming back. And even harder for you when you're back at base and they're going out on missions and you got your friends out there that might not come back. And I know some didn't. How can you walk people through how to process that fear? And then how can they even get it into practice? Because it's one thing to understand the theory, but it's another thing to actually do it.
Yeah. So there's some people with COVID that should absolutely be afraid. If you're elderly, if you have a compromised immune system, if you have underlying health issues, this thing is bad. I've been talking about my dad. Like, my dad is 80 years old, and he's compromised immune system. I mean, if my dad catches this, it's not going to be good. So he needs to be like afraid and use that fear to keep him with habits that will keep him safe through this. Other people, myself, I'm a young, healthy guy. There's not much for me to be afraid of because I think if I got sick with this, it would take me down for a couple days, maybe a week, whatever, and I'd be okay. That's what happens to a majority of young, healthy people that get it. So I think what you have to do, and this is when I talk about fear, I always say, listen, there's things that you can control and there's things that you can't control. And what you want to do is you take the things that you can't control. I could be in that percentage of people, that tiny percentage of people that catches this, and even though they're young and even though they're healthy, they die. Like, I could be in that category. And that's something that I can't really control. If it ended up that way, that's the way it is. It's a tiny percentage. I have to kind of take that and compartmentalize it. There's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing I can do about that. If I'm in that category, there's nothing I can do about it. And then there's a bunch of things that I can control, right? There's a bunch of things that I can control. and I need to focus on the things that I can control and then go out and execute. You know, I used to talk about, and I've told this story before on with you in the past, you can be afraid of getting blown up by an IED, an improvised explosive device, and a roadside bomb. That was the biggest killer in Iraq. 75% of the casualties were caused by roadside bombs. That fear can be paralyzing. And if you focus on that fear and the chance that that can happen to you, you won't be able to do your job. So what you say is, okay, that can happen to me. What can I do to mitigate that risk? And then once you've done what you can to mitigate that risk, you got to put it out of your mind and concentrate on the things that you can control. So that's what I do. I look at the things that I can control. It's little things right now. Hey, keep your distance from people, wash your hands, all these little, I can control those things. But there's things that I can't control, which is if by some random chance I get this from wherever, the supermarket, and then some other random chance that I'm the tiny percentage of people that are young and healthy that this kills, I can't control that. And if I focus on that, I'm going to be paralyzed. And that means I'm not going anywhere. I'm not carrying on with my life, and I'm not going to live like that. So what you can't control. If you can't control something, compartmentalize it and don't focus on it. When you focus on that stuff, it actually takes away from doing well. It actually takes away from you being able to do your job. So focus on the things you can control.
Yeah, solid advice. Jocko, I wonder if we could just walk people through maybe some of the basic tenets. Start with extreme ownership, get into dichotomy of leadership, and just maybe end up on some of the tactics in the field manual. Extreme ownership, obviously when you first came here 4 years ago, had a big impact on me. I started living it. Honestly, I got these affirmations I say every day, and I still say a bunch of those things from the book. I said them this morning: prioritize and execute, lead down the chain of command, over communicate, all this stuff. Like I say to myself every day as reminders. And I actually teach my students in my class. Like they watch your video. And the 3 tenets of my class are resistance, which is a concept from Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, understanding that there are forces working against you and you don't get emotional about them, but you know they're there. Extreme ownership, they watch your videos and they all pledge to take extreme ownership in the course. And it's been a game changer, Jocko, because it's a mindset and they've mostly never heard it before. And some are different places on the victim spectrum. Some are massive victims and some are partial victims. And even those of us that claim to own extreme ownership, still have victim tendencies. And so they kind of embrace it. But for people that maybe don't know the concept, maybe you can just walk us through first how you thought of it and then just a basic understanding of it.
Well, you asked me how I thought of it. I actually named it when I was working with a client, and this client, I was working with a senior leader, and they were complaining about this and complaining about this and complaining about something else, and they weren't getting what they needed. And I wrote an email to that individual, and I shared it with all of her peers. And the email that I wrote was, I said, listen, I was a task unit commander at SEAL Team 3. The boss above my boss had a meeting, brought us all in, told us what was going on, gave us an update about the world, gave us an update about the deployments, gave us an update about the SEAL teams. And then he said, hey, is there anything that you guys need? So, he's reaching down the chain of command a few levels to ask us, hey, is there anything that you need? And so he starts going around the room, and the first task unit commander says, well, my guys need boots for winter warfare because they don't have the right boots. And the next guy says, we need Wi-Fi internet out at our desert training site because the guys need to be able to contact their families when they're out there. And the next guy says, well, we need this new headset that's come out because that's going to help us do our operations better. He went around the room and everyone's asking for something. And he got to me and I said, I don't need anything, sir. We're good to go. I got it. And like you could hear the room, everyone just said, man, I wish I would have said that. All the other task unit commanders were thinking, I wish I would have said that, because what it said was, listen, you don't have to worry about me. I got this. And that wasn't like I didn't do it. I didn't say it to have this big impact. I was telling the truth. The truth was, you don't need to give me anything. I got it. I'll run with it. And what that meant was this relationship that I had with my boss's boss, when I actually needed something and I asked for it, I got whatever I wanted because he knew I really needed it. But the idea that, look, whatever's going on in my world, I control, I own, and I'm going to win. That's the initial time that I started, that I wrote the word extreme ownership, was explaining this to a client. Then once I explained that, people would ask me about it. And I would explain all these situations where it's not only this positive way that it comes out, it's actually in a negative way too.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.